Deep in the forgotten corners of human memory lies a secret that Christianity could never quite erase, the story of a goddess so powerful that she had to be transformed into a monster to contain her influence. This is not merely another fairy tale about a witch in the woods. This is the hidden history of Baba Yaga, a divine being whose true nature has been concealed beneath centuries of deliberate distortion and cultural suppression. In the primordial forests of the Slavic world, where reality itself becomes negotiable and the boundaries between life and death blur into shadow, there exists a domain that defies every law of nature. You must travel beyond the reach of church bells and human settlement, beyond the safety of familiar paths into the heart of the untamed wilderness. Here, where the trees whisper secrets older than memory and the air thrums with supernatural energy, you might encounter something that will forever change your understanding of the divine feminine. The forest is not passive scenery, but a living consciousness, a breathing entity that serves as the border between our mundane reality and the realm of pure magic. Each step deeper into its shadows takes you further from the world of Christian saints and closer to the domain of an ancient power that predates all modern faiths. The very atmosphere grows thick with otherworldly presence, and the silence becomes so profound that your own heartbeat sounds like thunder in your ears. When you finally reach her domain, the first thing you encounter is not the goddess herself, but her impossible dwelling, a structure that shatters every conception of what a house should be. This is no ordinary cottage, but a living architectural impossibility. A crude log cabin balanced precariously upon massive, scaly chicken legs that shift and dance with restless energy. The structure possesses its own consciousness, its own terrible will. Spinning in dizzying circles or striding through the forest with predatory grace, the house is surrounded by a fence that tells the story of every soul who failed to show proper respect to its mistress. The posts are human thigh bones, bleached white by weather and time. The gate swings on hinges made from human ribs, and the lock is a jawbone whose teeth still gleam with malevolent intelligence. Crowning each post sits a human skull, their empty sockets burning with an eternal flame that provides the only light in this realm of perpetual twilight. To gain entry, you must know the ancient words of power, the incantation that proves your worthiness to approach divinity itself. Little hut, turn your back to the forest and your front to me. Only upon hearing these sacred syllables will the house acknowledge your presence, groaning and creaking as it turns to face you, lowering itself to earth like a great beast kneeling before its master. Among all the heroes and heroines who have dared to seek an audience with this banished goddess, none is more celebrated than Vasilisa the Wise, whose journey into the supernatural realm represents the archetypal quest for divine feminine wisdom. Her story begins with the most precious inheritance a mother can leave her daughter, not gold or jewels, but the gift of inner guidance made manifest. When Vasilisa's beloved mother lay dying, she pressed into her daughter's hands a small wooden doll, unremarkable to casual observation but imbued with extraordinary power. "Feed this doll whenever you eat," the dying woman whispered. "Consult her in times of trouble, and she will guide you through any darkness." This was no mere toy, but the embodiment of ancestral wisdom, the intuitive knowledge passed down through countless generations of women who had learned to survive in a world that often sought to crush their spirits. After her mother's death, Vasilisa's father, weakened by grief and loneliness, made the fateful decision to remarry. His new wife arrived with 2 daughters of her own, and together they formed a trinity of jealousy and cruelty that would make Vasilisa's life a daily torment. The stepmother recognized immediately that Vasilisa possessed something she and her daughters lacked, an inner light that could not be extinguished by hardship or hatred. Determined to break the girl's spirit, the stepmother assigned her every menial task imaginable. Vasilisa was forced to scrub floors, tend fires, carry water, and perform endless household drudgery while her stepsisters lived in idle comfort. Yet each night, when the house fell silent, Vasilisa would share a morsel of her meagre dinner with the doll and whisper her troubles to its carved wooden face. In response, the doll would spring to life, working through the darkness to complete impossible tasks while Vasilisa slept peacefully. Despite their cruelty, Vasilisa's beauty and grace only increased with each passing day, fed by the strength she drew from her connection to divine feminine wisdom. This growth enraged her stepfamily beyond measure, leading them to devise the most cunning and deadly plot of all. The stepmother relocated the family to an isolated cottage at the very edge of the haunted forest, a place where the boundary between the mortal world and the supernatural realm grew thin as gossamer. Local folklore spoke in hushed whispers of the terrible being who ruled these woods, a creature so fearsome that even speaking her name aloud could summon unwanted attention. On a cold autumn evening, when the wind howled through the trees like the voices of the damned, the stepmother extinguished every source of light in the cottage, plunging them into absolute darkness. "We have no fire," she announced with feigned distress. "Someone must journey to our neighbour's house to borrow a flame." She turned her cold gaze upon Vasilisa, knowing full well that their only neighbour was the legendary witch, whose very existence struck terror into the hearts of all who knew her name. Armed only with the sacred doll hidden in her pocket, Vasilisa stepped into the primordial darkness of the enchanted forest. This was no ordinary woodland, but a living cathedral of ancient power, where every shadow held consciousness and every whisper of wind carried messages from the spirit world. The path beneath her feet seemed to shift and change with each step, as if the forest itself were testing her resolve. As she walked through the endless night, the woods grew progressively more supernatural. Trees twisted into impossible shapes, their branches forming arcane symbols against the star-drunk sky. Strange luminescences flickered between the trunks, not quite lights, not quite spirits, but something altogether more mysterious. The very air seemed to thicken with magical potential, making each breath feel charged with otherworldly energy. When dawn finally broke through the canopy, Vasilisa witnessed the first of 3 cosmic mysteries that would forever change her understanding of the universe. A rider thundered past her on the forest path, mounted on a pure white stallion whose hooves struck sparks from the earth. The horseman himself was clothed entirely in white, his face radiant as polished silver, and as he passed, the darkness of night fled before him like a retreating army. This was no mortal being but Day himself, one of the primal forces that served the goddess of the forest. The sun climbed higher, and with it came the second mystical rider. This one wore garments of brilliant crimson and rode a horse whose coat gleamed like fresh blood. His face blazed with the intensity of the noonday sun, and as he galloped past, the full power of solar energy flooded the forest with golden light. This was the Red Sun, another of the cosmic servants who answered to the mistress of this realm. As evening approached and Vasilisa drew near to her destination, the final rider appeared. Cloaked in midnight black and mounted on a steed darker than shadow, his face was a void that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. As he passed through the gates of the goddess's domain, night fell instantly across the entire forest. A darkness so complete it seemed almost solid. This was Dark Night himself, the third member of the divine trinity that controlled the very passage of time. Through these manifestations, Vasilisa began to understand that she was approaching not merely a powerful witch, but a being whose authority extended over the fundamental forces of existence itself. This was a goddess who commanded not just magic, but time, light and darkness, the very building blocks of reality. At the heart of the clearing stood the impossible dwelling of the banished goddess, its chicken legs scratching restlessly at the earth as the structure performed its eternal dance between stillness and motion. The fence of bones gleamed white in the supernatural darkness, each skull crowned with flames that burned without fuel, casting an eerie glow that revealed more than mortal eyes were meant to see. Following the ancient protocol, Vasilisa approached the gate and spoke the sacred words that would compel the hut to grant her audience. The massive structure groaned and shuddered, its great legs bending as it lowered itself to earth with the weight of primordial authority. The door, carved with symbols that predated written language, swung open with a sound like distant thunder. Inside, the hut defied all natural law. The interior space expanded far beyond what the exterior walls could possibly contain, stretching into shadowy depths that seemed to fold back upon themselves. The air was thick with the scent of herbs that existed only in the realm of spirits. And stranger still were the 3 pairs of disembodied hands that moved through the space like phantom servants, performing their mistress's will with supernatural efficiency. Then came the sound that announced the return of the goddess herself, a howling that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of reality as she flew home through the night sky. Her vehicle was not some conventional conveyance, but a giant mortar that ground the air itself as she steered with a pestle the size of a small tree. Behind her, a broom made of silver birch swept away all traces of her passage, ensuring that only those she chose could follow her path. She landed in her courtyard with earth-shaking force, and when she emerged, Vasilisa beheld the true form of the banished goddess. This was Baba Yaga in all her terrible glory, neither fully human nor entirely spirit, but something altogether more primal. Her iron teeth gleamed like weapons in the skullfire light, and her eyes held the accumulated wisdom and fury of millennia. She was ancient beyond measure, yet possessed of a vitality that made the very air around her crackle with power. "I smell the presence of a mortal," the goddess declared, her voice carrying the weight of avalanches and the whisper of winter wind. "Who dares enter my domain uninvited?" Vasilisa, guided by the wisdom of her sacred doll, stepped forward without trembling. She understood instinctively that she stood before not a mere witch, but a fallen deity whose power remained undimmed despite centuries of exile. With deep respect but without subservience, she explained her mission and requested the gift of fire. The goddess regarded the young woman with eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of empires. "So you seek fire from one who commands the very elements themselves," she mused, her voice like the grinding of glacial ice. "Very well. But nothing in my realm is given freely. You will earn your prize through service, or you will become part of my eternal collection." She gestured toward the fence of bones, where one post stood conspicuously empty. "Fail in your tasks, child, and your skull will light this clearing for 1,000 years to come." The trials that followed were not mere household chores, but sacred tests designed to probe the depths of Vasilisa's character. Each task was impossible by mortal standards. She was commanded to separate a vast pile of wheat from an equal amount of dirt and poppy seeds, grain by individual grain, before the goddess's return. The mountain of mixed materials rose higher than Vasilisa's head, and she had been given no tools but her bare hands. Any ordinary person would have despaired, but Vasilisa possessed something more valuable than strength or cleverness. She had learned to trust the divine feminine wisdom that flowed through her maternal lineage. Taking out her sacred doll, she shared her meagre food and whispered her need. The doll's eyes began to glow with inner fire, and its tiny voice spoke words of comfort and power. While Vasilisa rested in peaceful sleep, the doll worked through the night with supernatural assistance. Armies of ants answered its call, their tiny bodies perfectly suited to the delicate work of separation. Birds descended to help, their sharp eyes able to distinguish the smallest differences between grain types. By dawn, 3 perfect piles stood where chaos had reigned before: wheat, dirt, and poppy seeds separated with impossible precision. When the goddess returned, her rage at finding the task completed was matched only by her grudging respect for whatever power had made such a miracle possible. Bound by ancient laws that even she dared not violate, she was forced to acknowledge Vasilisa's success while planning even more challenging tests for the days to come. Each subsequent trial followed the same pattern: impossible tasks that would have broken the spirit of any ordinary mortal. completed through the mysterious intervention of forces that served the sacred feminine wisdom embodied in the doll. Through it all, Vasilisa never saw exactly how the work was accomplished. She simply trusted in the power that flowed through her bloodline and awoke each morning to find her trials overcome. After 3 days of impossible trials, the goddess finally acknowledged that she had been bested by a power she was compelled to respect. The ancient laws that governed the exchange between mortal and divine were clear. The seeker had proven worthy, and the prize must be granted. But before bestowing her gift, the goddess offered Vasilisa the opportunity to ask questions about the mysteries she had witnessed. This was itself a test of wisdom, for in the realm of the divine, knowledge could be as dangerous as ignorance. Vasilisa, guided by her intuitive wisdom, asked only about the cosmic riders she had encountered on her journey. "The white horseman who brought the dawn," she said respectfully. "Who was he?" "That was my bright day," the goddess replied, her tone carrying the weight of cosmic authority. "He serves me as the herald of morning, and the red horseman who brought the blazing sun, my red sun," came the answer. "He bears the fire of midday across the sky at my command, and the black horseman who brought the night, my dark night. Through him I draw the curtain of darkness across the world." Having satisfied her curiosity about the external mysteries, Vasilisa wisely chose not to inquire about the secret workings within the goddess's domain. When asked why she showed such restraint, she replied with words that demonstrated her growing wisdom. "You yourself have said, grandmother, that too much knowledge can be dangerous for those who are unprepared to bear its weight." This answer pleased the goddess greatly, for it showed that Vasilisa understood the sacred principle that divine knowledge must be earned gradually and accepted with proper reverence. She had passed the final test, the test of wisdom itself. With the trials complete and Vasilisa's worthiness established beyond question, the goddess's demeanour underwent a profound transformation. The terrifying aspect she had worn like armour fell away, revealing glimpses of the ancient maternal power that lay at her core. She was still fearsome, still dangerous, but now she was bound by the sacred laws of hospitality and divine exchange. Moving to her fence of bones with ceremonial gravity, the goddess selected one of the fire-crowned skulls and mounted it carefully upon a staff of blackened wood. This was no ordinary flame that danced within those empty sockets, but divine fire itself, the same cosmic energy that powered the stars and set the boundaries between life and death. "Take this light," she commanded, pressing the staff into Vasilisa's hands. "It is what your stepfamily sent you to retrieve, though they little understood what they were truly demanding." As Vasilisa accepted the macabre lantern, she felt the weight of its significance. This was not merely fire to light lamps and warm hearths, but a fragment of divine justice, the very essence of cosmic law made manifest in the world of mortals. The goddess watched as the young woman prepared to depart, and in her ancient eyes there flickered something that might have been approval. "You have been well served in this place," she said, her words carrying the force of prophecy. "Go now, and be well in all your journeys." The journey home through the enchanted forest bore no resemblance to Vasilisa's terrifying trek into the unknown. The divine fire that blazed within the skull cast a light that pierced through every shadow and illusion, revealing the true nature of the path she walked. Where once the twisted trees had seemed to reach for her with malevolent intent, now they drew back respectfully, recognizing the sacred power she carried. The supernatural radiance that surrounded her served as both protection and proclamation. Here walked one who had been tested by the divine feminine itself and found worthy. The darkness that had once pressed close with suffocating weight now retreated, unable to withstand the purifying brilliance of cosmic fire. Despite the skull's terrible appearance, Vasilisa felt no fear of the object she carried. Through her trials, she had been transformed from a victim of circumstance into an agent of divine will. The fire that burned in those hollow sockets was not just light but justice itself, and she understood with growing clarity the purpose it would serve. When she finally emerged from the forest and approached the cottage where her tormentors waited, Vasilisa had been fundamentally changed. No longer the frightened girl who had been sent away to die. She now carried within herself a portion of the goddess's own authority, the power to see truth and dispense justice according to cosmic law. Her stepfamily rushed to greet her, their relief evident as they babbled about their inability to maintain any fire during her absence. Every match had failed to strike. Every ember had refused to catch, as if the very element of fire had withdrawn its cooperation in protest of their cruelty. But as Vasilisa crossed the threshold and brought the divine fire into their domestic space, the skull's burning gaze fixed upon the three women who had orchestrated her near destruction. The otherworldly intelligence that dwelled within those flames began its inexorable work of judgment. The light that emanated from the skull was unlike any earthly flame. It possessed consciousness, intent, and an unerring ability to perceive the moral weight of every soul it encountered. As the stepmother and her daughters stared into those blazing sockets, they found themselves unable to look away, transfixed by a power that saw through every deception and pretense they had ever worn. The fire began to intensify, growing brighter and hotter with each passing moment. The three wicked women tried desperately to flee, to hide in the shadows of the room, but there was no escaping the all-seeing gaze of divine justice. The light followed them wherever they went, its supernatural radiance burning away their lies and exposing the cruelty that festered in their hearts. This was not vengeance in any human sense, but cosmic law asserting itself through the medium of sacred fire. The goddess's gift was revealing its true purpose, not merely to provide light for human comfort, but to serve as an agent of divine retribution against those who had violated the natural order through their deliberate cruelty. As the night wore on, the skull's fire continued its relentless work. The stepmother and her daughters found their very essence being consumed by the purifying flames, their physical forms dissolving under the weight of perfect judgment. By dawn, nothing remained of them but 3 small piles of ash, the final transformation of cruelty into emptiness. Vasilisa watched this process with a mixture of awe and understanding. She had not sought revenge against her tormentors, but the divine fire had its own imperative to balance the scales of justice. The goddess's gift had served its purpose, demonstrating that cosmic law ultimately prevails over human malice. To understand the true significance of what Vasilisa had experienced, we must journey far beyond the realm of fairy tales and into the misty depths of pre-Christian spirituality. The being she encountered in the forest was no mere witch or supernatural antagonist, but a fallen goddess whose origins stretch back to the very dawn of Slavic civilization. Before the arrival of Christianity transformed the spiritual landscape of Eastern Europe, the Slavic peoples worshipped a complex pantheon of nature deities whose power was woven into every aspect of daily life. At the head of this divine hierarchy stood Perun, the thunder god whose lightning split the sky and whose sacred oak trees served as earthly temples. But equally powerful and far more mysterious were the feminine deities who governed the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. Among these ancient goddesses, we find the true origins of Baba Yaga in figures like Morana, the divine personification of winter and death whose annual banishment ensured the return of spring. Morana was not evil in any simple sense, but rather the necessary counterbalance to life and growth, the cosmic force that cleared away the old to make room for the new. When Christianity began its systematic conquest of Slavic spirituality, these powerful feminine deities posed a particular threat to the new patriarchal order. They could not be simply eliminated, for their worship was too deeply embedded in the folk consciousness. Instead, they were deliberately transformed, demoted from goddesses to witches, their sacred attributes recast as signs of evil, their ancient wisdom portrayed as malevolent cunning. Baba Yaga represents the most successful of these transformations. What had once been a revered goddess of death and rebirth became a terrifying hag who devoured children. Her sacred domain, once a temple where pilgrims sought divine wisdom, became a house of horrors to be avoided at all costs. The church had successfully transformed a goddess into a monster. Yet, even in her diminished fairy tale form, Baba Yaga retained unmistakable traces of her original divine nature. Her command over day, sun, and night revealed her as a cosmic force whose authority extended far beyond any earthly realm. Her impossible hut, poised on the boundary between worlds, marked her as a guardian of thresholds, the divine gatekeeper who controlled passage between the realm of the living and the land of the dead. This liminal position was not accidental but essential to her true function. As a goddess of death and transformation, she naturally dwelt at the border between states of being. Her domain was neither fully alive nor completely dead, but something altogether more mysterious, a space where the normal rules of existence were suspended and profound change became possible. The trials she imposed upon visitors were not arbitrary cruelties but sacred initiations designed to test worthiness for transformation. Only those who demonstrated proper courage, wisdom, and respect could hope to survive an encounter with cosmic power and emerge reborn. The fence of bones that surrounded her domain told the story of those who had failed this ultimate test, their remains serving as both warning and testament to the absolute nature of divine judgment. Understanding Baba Yaga's true nature as a banished goddess transforms our entire perception of stories like Vasilisa's, what appears on the surface to be a tale of a brave girl outwitting a wicked which is actually a profound spiritual allegory, the story of a soul's journey through death and rebirth under the guidance of divine feminine wisdom. The impossible hut on chicken legs reveals itself as a symbol of the liminal space between worlds, a sacred threshold that can only be crossed by those who prove their spiritual worthiness. The gruesome fence becomes a boundary marker separating the realm of ordinary existence from the domain of pure transformation, while the three cosmic riders represent the goddess's absolute authority over the fundamental forces of time and space. Even her seemingly bizarre mode of transportation, the mortar and pestle, takes on deeper meaning when understood in its proper context. These were the sacred tools of the ancient wise women, the healers and midwives who presided over the mysteries of birth, death, and healing. In Baba Yaga's hands, they become vehicles of cosmic power, capable of grinding the very fabric of reality and sweeping away the tracks of divine intervention. The goddess exists beyond the normal boundaries of space and time, and her means of travel reflect this transcendent nature. The power of Baba Yaga's story lies not just in its ancient origins, but in its continuing relevance to the human experience. Stripped of its supernatural trappings, Vasilisa's journey represents a universal pattern of psychological and spiritual development that remains as vital today as it was 1,000 years ago. Every human being must eventually leave the safety of childhood and venture into the dark forest of adult responsibility. We all face impossible tasks that seem designed to break our spirits. We all encounter forces that seem determined to devour our hopes and dreams. And we all must learn to trust the inner wisdom that connects us to something greater than our individual fears and limitations. The divine fire she bestows upon worthy seekers represents the inner light that guides us through our darkest hours, the intuitive wisdom that can illuminate the path forward when rational thought fails. This fire burns away what is false and reveals what is eternally true, just as it consumed Vasilisa's tormentors while leaving her untouched. The goddess serves as a reminder that transformation often requires the destruction of what no longer serves us, and that the most profound wisdom is earned through facing our deepest fears with courage and authentic presence. As our exploration of Baba Yaga's hidden history draws to a close, we are left with a profound appreciation for the complexity and enduring power of this remarkable figure. What began as the worship of an ancient goddess has survived centuries of suppression and transformation to emerge as one of the most compelling and psychologically sophisticated archetypes in world mythology. The story of her banishment and resurrection reveals much about the broader patterns of cultural conquest and resistance that have shaped human civilization. When dominant cultures seek to suppress alternative ways of understanding the sacred, they rarely succeed in complete elimination. Instead, the old truths find new forms, hiding in fairy tales and folk wisdom until they can safely emerge once more. Baba Yaga's journey from goddess to witch to modern icon demonstrates the impossible-to-destroy nature of authentic spiritual wisdom. No matter how thoroughly the authorities attempt to demonize and diminish such figures, their essential truth continues to speak to something deep within the human psyche. Her enduring appeal lies not in her fearsome reputation, but in what she represents, the promise that even in our darkest moments, even when we feel utterly lost in the deep forest of life's challenges, there exists a source of wisdom and power that can guide us through to transformation. She reminds us that the price of real wisdom is always high, but for those brave enough to pay it, the rewards are beyond measure. The goddess may have been banished from her original throne, but she has never truly gone away. She waits still in the deep places of the human soul, ready to reveal her secrets to any seeker bold enough to approach her impossible hut and speak the ancient words of summoning. In the end, that may be the most important truth of all, that the divine feminine, no matter how thoroughly suppressed, can never be permanently silenced. Her story continues, and so does ours. The forest path remains open for those who dare to walk it, and the ancient words of power still echo through the trees for those who have ears to hear them. In a world that has forgotten how to listen to the wisdom of the wild, Baba Yaga stands as a reminder that some truths can only be learned by those willing to venture beyond the safety of the known and face the mystery that dwells in the heart of the forest.